Masks off? Masks off. Welcome back to Philosopher 2, Chapter 5. What do we have going on here? Hey, status report. What's going on in there? Still no go. She's being even more stubborn than usual. Her actions completely scramble the timeline. You've seen her poll-uppers. Can you still get the job done? Yes, of course you can. Just don't forget what we have put it on the line. Never will. Just be careful, okay? You too. I need something healthy. Stress burns calories. I'm hanging up now. Baby carrots! Huh. Mom? Hey. How you doing? I'm fine. I'm just fine. Really? Of course not! We've been here for hours. We've knocked down philosopher after philosopher. But the gate still hasn't accepted the validity of my position. It's not only the gate that's being stubborn here. Stepping back as a strategy isn't panning out. Making us seem weak. In the last few hours, you've coddled Machiavelli, critiqued democracy, and given leeway to communism. How do you think that will play with voters? Tendency to double down rather than reassess. Rooted in childhood experience? Oh? Need to go on the offensive. I need a game changer. Whoever's next, I'm really gonna let them have it. Aggressive tendencies could habitualize if not handled effectively. Ooh. Compounding environmental stress factors should not be ignored. Okay, hold on. Who are you and what are you doing? Apologies. Just making some initial observations to prepare for our upcoming session. Ooh. I was going to let that scene play out, but I guess we'll get started. Let me introduce our resident psychiatrist, Frantz Fanon. Born in the French colony of Martinique in 1925, his insight has proven invaluable for many of us here. Ooh. I don't need therapy. Everyone needs therapy. Being human is hard. It does no good to pretend otherwise. But I'm not here to treat you, Senator. I'm here to debate. You claim your American system is perfect, and, well, I have thoughts about that. Ooh. Is he going to actively critique the present day? Because if so, that's quite interesting. In addition to his psychiatric work, Fanon wrote extensively about the effects of colonial attitudes on societies in the global struggle of decolonization. He personally participated in this struggle to liberate the Arab population of colonial Algeria from French control. My work was focused on a time and a place. I said as much at the start of my first book. The struggles of the colonized in Algiers were not the same as the colonized in South Africa, the native in South Africa, native in South America, or the black community in America. But there's a kinship between all the oppressed, which I suppose is why I stand here today, my writings deemed immortal by history. The specter of my old reflections hangs over your ideals, whether you acknowledge it or not. It's probably better we acknowledge it. Fine, acknowledged. Let's get started. Oh boy. This is going to be interesting. Every institution in colonial societies, no matter how innocent seeming, serves to extend and enforce the culture of the colonizer as the true culture. A multitude of moral teachers, counselors, and bewilderers separates the exploited from those in power. In such a situation, the colonized have no choice but to conform to succeed, adopting the manners of their oppressors. But true assimilation is impossible. The colonized will always be reminded of their otherness by the colonizer. No perfect society would allow these inhumane conditions, so we must dismantle them by any means necessary. And so we are faced with an unwinnable dilemma. Governments demand we assimilate, but also demand we remember our place. We are forever caught between these two incompatible imperatives. This is the lived reality for the black, for the indigenous, for any nation actively oppresses. For any nation actively oppresses. Now then, Senator, I believe you plan to let me have it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Adna, you can keep the lead. What? I'm an old white woman. The optics of my debating race are terrible. Last thing I need during election season is to get cat. Pythia, please. Ah. Oh my god. Look, it's like you said at the start. You don't have to prove he's wrong. Just see if we can learn some. The sentence that's using that sentence is meaningless when it's coming from you, Pythia. Using it to dodge the conversation. Nice to know you were actually listening, but why can't you do that? Because I'm bad at it, Pumpkin. I'm bad at not arguing. Oh, self-awareness? This self-reflection may represent progress for the senator. I guess. That or she's just doubling down on political cowardice. That is also true. Well, okay then. Fanon, let's see how this goes. Yes, I'm sure the process will be informative. Alright. What do you mean by this? Societies are constructed around the values of their ruling population. The laws and norms of society naturally extend those values, cementing them into place. The culture of the colonizer as their true culture. We're gonna see. Let's see. Less a question of do you have evidence, and more of a question of let's hear some of the historical evidence you can provide. It's the matter of language. To speak a language is to take on a world, a culture. When a colonial power first takes over, they mandate all speak the language of the mother country. And in Martinique, it was not enough to speak French. Society demanded you speak a certain type of French. My own mother drilled this into me at a young age. We don't want any of that Creole nonsense around here. Dignified, proper, white French only. Ooh. This is just one example. What you eat with, how you greet each other, which drugs are permissible and which are not, all are defined by the colonists' culture. Correction? Which is why we have an issue in the first place. Without critical examination, society naturally falls into these patterns. He's so right. There is no shortage of individuals, even among the oppressed, who claim the downtrodden are where they deserve to be. Oof. Either because the oppressed are inherently inferior, they simply have not tried hard enough. Separate the exploited from those. Yeah. The colonists reserve the nicest homes, the finest schools, and the most respected jobs for themselves. The colonized are denied access to the necessary tools for success. As a result of this denial, and only this denial, many in the native population become exactly what they're believed to be: poor, destitute, and uneducated. Through extraordinary fortune, some may still break through, climb the ranks of civilized society. Such individuals are then held up as proof that there is no real problem. If you'd only worked as hard as she had, you, too, could have the deluxe model shack. It all makes it easier to believe the native is wholly responsible for their position, which in turn justifies keeping them there. It establishes there are forces actively keeping these hierarchies in place. Shall just picture the lengths required to undo them. To succeed in a colonized society, you must act like the colonizer. I've heard it said that America should be a melting pot, people from all over, merging into one culture. But that one culture is the pot is definitely hot. It scalds so many who try to jump in. I always prefer the salad bowl idea. Everyone maintains their own culture while contributing to the greater whole. That is a preferable mental model, but so many still desire to boil that salad into bland cultural sludge. I haven't actually heard the salad bowl idea, but that's a really good way of putting that, and that's a really ideal dream, which unfortunately, yeah. That's the ideal dream, isn't it? I'm afraid I'm lost. Why does it matter how America cooks its citizens? I agree, Arbiter. These food metaphors are getting hard to swallow. Boo! she is her father's daughter. Alright, backing. Why do you demand a black man from Upper Niger wear shoes? Why do we act as if this is necessary to become the next Mozart? That is no less ridiculous than demanding a white man study Hindu lyricism, or else he will never become an Einstein. Yet if I show up to a job interview in something outside the cultural norm, be it a sari, a shuka, or a kilt, my prospects will be diminished. Accents that are strange or unintelligible will only cause further damage. If I show up dressed in a suit, if I walk the walk and talk the talk, well, my odds are a little better. A little better? A little better. For even if I do all those things, I am still a black man. Whew. Whew. We're getting very real today. We're getting very real and very, very relevant today. How disconnected? The culture of the colonizer is not just a surface detail. It is embedded in the social contract. Social contracts? Like we discussed with Locke? I didn't realize you were a fan. I'm not a fan. John Locke. Acute egomania. Situation worsens daily. But intervention may become insufferable. When'd you write that? Let's see. 50 years ago. He stopped coming to his appointments. Yeah, that checks out. I'm a fan of some Lockean ideals. Life and liberty. But too often they exist only for a few. Yeah. God, that's so real. It's the ideal that we all preach, but it's held up. It's held up for those few that, like, are fortunate enough to break through, and then used as a weight to say, you can do this. We don't need to do anything to make your lives better. You can do this if you just work harder. And that's so fucked. That's so fucked. It's... What do you mean by this? No matter how hard you try, you'll never truly be a member of the colonizing group. Whether they seize upon your mannerisms, your language, or your skin, you will be singled out as different. They won't let you forget. Is it really impossible, though? I mean, sure, there are racists out there, but I will speak to my own experience. To be black is to always be aware of your body, and the way others see your body. For a time among trusted friends, you can perhaps relax, but that only makes the sting worse when the illusion is shattered. I'll never forget the child who stopped in the street to tell his mother he was frightened by my mere presence. All I could do was laugh, but it wasn't funny. Even in the intelligible realm, I never know when I'll run into another Immanuel Kant situation. Kant came to agree with you. Yes, it only took 30 years to convince him I wasn't some genetic outlier. Oh, Kant. Might have gone more quickly if he didn't insist on constantly taking walks. That man's neuroses are overwhelming. Fighting him a reward for philosophical clout was an eternity with history's neediest shut-ins. Whew. The man placed on the oppressed is not one that can be met. It's a fundamentally untenable situation. The first thought that pops into my head is constantly moving goalposts, but it's ultimately, like, the rest of the goalposts are moving, but the final one can never be reached. By the people they describe here. What do you mean by this? The colonial system is dehumanizing and fundamentally immoral. It must come to an end whatever it takes, in order for mankind to move forward. By whatever it takes, you mean whatever it takes. There can be no limitations on the fight for freedom. It's nice to dream of reform through speeches and negotiations, and certainly those should be attempted. When those fail, we cannot stop there. The people have to take up arms.
Nonsense!
Hey there, please. Wait, hold on. I know I said I wasn't taking the lead, but this just took a hard left turn. Oh? I agree these issues need to be addressed. During my time in office, I've tried my best to help do so. To advocate violence, it can't come to that. Too many empty chairs and empty tables. You're stealing You're stealing your daughter's words now. We have to be better. Can't.
Nonsense.
It does not surprise me that this is where we break, Senator. After all, you staked your life on believing in the system. Consider a reality that conflicts with that. Well, I'm sure it provokes dismay. I'm not advocating violence. I'm advocating the end of violence. But you just said, I stand by what I said. Force cannot be eliminated as a tool in resisting oppression. But that is not because violence is desired. It's because society makes it necessary. Allow me to elaborate. Ooh, great. Though the colonized intellectual often seeks reform through political action, such compromises inevitably fall short. Colonization is inherently violent. It relies on enforcing the idea that the native is weak or inferior. When the oppressed rise up in arms, the very notions upon which the colony is built are challenged. The system cannot survive the shock. Thus, revolutionary violence breaks the cycle of violence rather than escalating it. You see, Senator, violence is part of the remedy because violence is already in the system. When we revolt, it is not in favor of a particular culture. We revolt because, for many reasons, we can no longer breathe. Do we really have no good examples of nonviolent reform? Emancipation Proclamation, the Civil Rights Movement? Yes. I forgot America solved racial injustice. Twice. I very much look forward to you solving it a third time. Each helped at least, but Pumpkin, neither of those were really peaceful. Emancipation Proclamation came only in the third year of a war. The Civil Rights Movement involved countless clashes between protesters and police. I see. Very interesting. Tell me, Senator, how do you reconcile this observation with your current ideals? Oh, well, I mean, there's enough power in the Senate to correct these injustices. Of course there is. But it wasn't used well, historically, or presently. Historically, of course. Indeed, many successful non-violent movements worked because their leaders were presented as an alternative to the threat of violence. Violence was, therefore, still a key part of the solution. Okay, well then, guess it's time for you to ask questions, huh? Are we here just, this conversation got really tense all of a sudden. All of a sudden? Alright, let's proceed, shall we? Alright. Hold on. What exactly is a colonized intellectual? A native who has obtained status in colonial society, often by translating the native experience for the colonizer. Their success is deeply rooted in the colonial system, so they have a vested interest in the system continuing. Now these individuals are not uncaring of their fellow natives. They often attempt to use their status to appeal to those in power. They limit these efforts to acceptable, polite channels, meeting the oppressors on their own turf. This approach gives them very little leverage. Without leverage, the results will be wholly inadequate. Politics involve negotiation, and negotiation involves compromise, correct? Yes, that's the ideal anyway. Well then, what is the compromise between continue the oppression and stop the oppression? Good news, everyone. We're doing a little less oppression. Confetti and drinks for all. A nice burst of serotonin, these little victories. They may even ease the tension for a while. In the end, the system continues mostly as before. Native will still be held down. How does this connect with to the rest of your argument? This is the essential setup for my overall point. Political action alone was an effective remedy, the rest would become unnecessary. Because such efforts often fall short, the people are forced to mobilize. reinforcing the native ideal. As long as the colonial system is in place, violence against the colonized is a part of daily life. Native communities are underfunded and over-policed. Natives are viewed as always as criminals and never as victims. Whether the force deployed is psychological or physical, it all works to keep the native in their place. Through organizations like the military and the police, governments claim the only legitimate license for violence. Military and the police, yeah. In colonial societies, the arm of the law actively seeks out the native, presuming they are guilty. I cannot count the number of times I was stopped by Algerian police solely because they mistook me for an Arab. They discovered I was from Martinique, they apologized profusely. Of course we know a Martinician is quite different from an Arab. I protested, saying we are all the same. They laugh and reply, "You don't know them." There is always a target on someone, on whom varies from community to community, but the results are the same. And the violence is not always physical, always waged on both the body and the soul of the native. Depictions of the colonized as stupid, as pitiable, do real psychological harm to native and settler alike. All are key in colonialism, and all will persist as long as the colonial thought does. Establishes it is the colonial government, not the native, who introduces violence into the system. It's only because force is used to maintain the hierarchy that force is needed to resist it. Yeah? Yeah? Notions being that the native is weak. In rising up, the native asserts their humanity. Proclaim loudly that their pain cannot be ignored. They will not remain neatly packed away, out of sight and mind. It's a logical extension of the previous statement. As the colony relies on the native being weak to justify their subjugation, the native fighting back challenges this core principle. If society depends on the sky being red and you pull back the curtain to reveal it is blue, there cannot help but be some shock. How do people explain it away with some bonkers reasoning? How can the sky be real if our eyes aren't real? Ah, yes, confirmation bias is sinister, especially when combined with sinister logic. A man whose only weapon is reason, there is nothing more necrotic than contact with unreason. Still, while some will bunker themselves in denial, society as a whole will be unable to avoid the tremors caused by natives asserting their humanity. It makes it so scary that the endemic of unreason is taking hold. Like, to an overwhelming degree. Establishes why violence is such an effective lever. Resistance from the native is directly contrary to the idea that they are weak and content. It says loudly and clearly that they will not be subjugated. Revolutionary violence breaks the cycle of violence. Okay, what Fanon is saying here is easy to strawman. Hear the talk show host now. Fanon wants to murder all the settlers. That's fundamentally not what he's saying. It's nice to be in a space with a straw man is not the only man that matters. This pitch is about leverage, and how, if you lack it, you need to create it. The question is, will this method of creating it actually work? Well, there's only one way to find out. To challenge it. The outbreak of violence challenges every element of the colonial system. Inevitably, under that strain, something gives way. Hold on. Colonial powers established their foothold with military force, right? I don't understand why that same military force wouldn't steamroll any resistance. Interesting. An understandable assumption, but for several reasons it is not that simple. In most colonial situations, the natives far outnumber the colonists. The foreign military's resources split across multiple fronts. The simple truth is, the force required to suppress the combined will of the people is beyond even the most well-equipped superpower. Secondly, the conflict changes the economic calculus for the colonizers. If they could win, the war effort would destroy the resources that made the colony desirable in the first place. Finally, many colonists are not true believers in the system. Faced with open conflict, they will sympathize with the oppressed. The longer the conflict rages, the more the sympathy grows. So colonial leaders quickly learn the power of violence, and find the answer is not to respond with greater violence, but to relax the tension. Okay, can we hold on to these points? They seem essential to me. I agree. Fanon, would you add them to your argument? Of course. Unite as a whole. The people united will never be defeated. As the struggle for independence spreads to the whole of the native population, colonial forces will inevitably be overwhelmed. Okay, I need more back into this. Weaponry can get pretty insane. Does it matter if you have more people when the other side is a tank? If the people charge the tank head-on, then yes, the tank will win. People are resourceful and will favor guerrilla tactics over head-on conflict. Furthermore, remember we are dealing primarily with situations where an outside country is exerting its influence on a local population. It takes far more effort to ship in a tank than it does for the native to recruit more numbers. The more brutal the tactics of the colonizer, the easier local recruitment becomes. Natives' forces will swell in proportion. But basically, as long as all the people stand together, they're destined to win. Indeed. The force needed to counter a united front is unsustainable, even for the greatest colonial power. Interesting. This establishes why the revolution cannot simply be crushed as you worry. The uprising is a force that will have to be reckoned with. Alright. An unallowed struggle to maintain control over the colonies quickly becomes an exercise in self-harm for the colonizer. Continued occupation drains resources on all fronts, spends riches already obtained, and damages those they still wish to extract. Alright, back this up. Here the forces of capitalism actually work in the natives' favor. The economies of the colonies and their motherland are closely linked. War damages the whole institution. So when faced with escalating conflict, the business owners and trade officers at home ask, why bother? Profit is their primary interest, and a potential trade deal with an independent country is far more advantageous than a futile fight to maintain control. Getting something is better than destroying everything. Benefit to capitalism? Baffling. When the potential profit outshines the desire for control and oppression. Very jarring that the only thing that can beat just pure oppression is money. Is greed. Awful. I hate it, but if that's what it takes. The machinations of capitalism favor the colonized in this conflict. Whatever the cover story, the primary purpose of colonies is to extract wealth from the colonized region. Conflict makes this impossible. Even from a self-interested perspective, it makes sense for the colonists to withdraw. Colonists are not a monolith. Not all embrace the actions of their governments. Some will even fight against them. Few will even reveal themselves to be nearer to the national struggle than certain native sons. In the end, barriers of blood and race prejudice break down on all sides. Alright. Every civil struggle in history reflects this. The oppressed have always found allies among those who could have been or previously were oppressors. These individuals will never be the core of the struggle, but they can still help. As a colonial power is inherently more willing to listen to its own citizens, we should not underestimate pressure from within. If all colonists wish to continue oppression, the struggle would inevitably be long and bloody. The fact that many settlers will question their own involvement is an important factor in bringing the conflict to an end in the natives' favor. continue to examine these backing statements here. Local recruitment, people stand together, they're destined to win. Feels like the point we need to challenge here. Okay, so the core point here is that we get people on the colonizing side who sympathize with the oppressed of the local population and offer pressure from within to make changes and withdraw. But the point here being that what happens on the opposite end?
Nonsense!
Appears to be. Okay, Fanon. This is a difficult topic, one I'm kind of unqualified to speak about. I just want to acknowledge that before I... No more hand-wringing, Ariadne Jones. Do not treat me like I am delicate. In return, I promise to do the same for you when you inevitably say something terrible. Right. Deep breath. Okay, here goes. Talked at length about how far the colonized will go to be accepted by the colonists. Walking, talking, and dressing like settlers, all in hopes of improving their status in society. Correct. They have no other choice. Also said, despite all obstacles in their way, some do integrate, right? On some level, yes. Full acceptance is impossible, but they can obtain some degree of comfort. Then we have a problem. It's resistance to colonial oppression. This cause that should unite the whole of the people seems unlikely to unite the people at all. Oh? If observed colonists are not a monolith, not all will join their side in the struggle. The same hold true for the colonized. Many natives won't care about or will outright object to attempts to disrupt society. The pitch is clearly a good one, no? An end to long-lasting inequalities. Sure, in the long term. In the short term, the conflict only represents more instability and hardship. A bitter pill for anyone to swallow. We discussed this with Locke. People will often ignore long-term benefits if the short term is painful. Yes, that is a good point. Central to your argument of violence working is that the will of the people is enough to threaten the colonial power. After all, it's only because their power is threatened that they will make concessions. But if they have like a core of people who have tried to integrate, that they can hold up and say, what we're doing is they hold up the people who have attempted to integrate, and they say, what we're doing is working. That's their argument against giving in and giving up any pressure here. And that is very dire. But that's a very difficult point. Alright. Too many choose to sit out the struggle. The calculus changes fundamentally. It becomes much more plausible for the colonial power to nip the resistance in the bud. In that case, violence won't accomplish anything at all. Very, very good, Ariadne. Tragically, all these observations are valid, and goes beyond sitting out. In Algeria, we had the Harkis. Harkis? Or Harkis? Harki. Yeah, served alongside the French army. Harka? Harki? Harkis? Muslims who joined the French to fight against their own people. Every social group contains multitudes. A cause will never win 100% support. This is the reality all dreams of change must face. Great, so now not even the most drastic measures can solve these problems. Such an optimistic portrait you two have painted. Hey, don't give me that. Interesting assertion, Senator, especially as we have not finished painting. Your daughter has correctly diagnosed these problems, but has taken their consequences too far. I have? You have. The complacency of many natives will not stop the resistance. It will merely change how it starts. Marx dreamed of a workers' revolt to end injustice. However, the life of the native worker is too dependent upon the colonial system. Would-be revolutionaries will be expelled from the unions in cities for challenging the structure on which others rely. There, among the destitute of the backcountry, the uneducated people whom the party ignores, the spark will actually light. Only then can revolutions spread to the cities and to all the people as the safety net crumbles. Facing multiple conflicts on multiple fronts, the colonial power will be forced to yield to the revolutionary leaders. With fighting at an end, the nation will finally be freed from all the conflicts of the past. Simply put, the promise of a glorious proletariat uprising is not enough for most workers to seek real change. Only among the neglected and the destitute can revolution actually spark. Ooh, bet Marx hates this argument. Kind of throws him and the working class under the bus. He spent quite a few of his sessions sprawled on my couch moping about it. You have a therapy couch here? I have a whole office. I need one. Philosophers have no shortage of baggage. Should hear Thomas Aquinas go on about his mother. Regardless, once the impoverished masses ignite into action, the security of the colonial system is proven to be an illusion. Suddenly, there's no reason for the rest of the nation to not join in. The whole of the people are united by the struggle. Igniting struggle. Impressively constructed, Fanon. Ayone Jones, are you ready to continue your questioning? As I'll ever be. What do you mean by this? There's little doubt in my mind of many of the injustices Marx observed are real. There's significant overlap between the terror of capitalism and the terror of colonialism, after all. But his dream of a glorious worker uprising is unlikely to occur in colonial countries. Simple observation, the strings between the native worker and the colonial system are hardly hidden. They work in the settlers' factories, use the settlers' tools, and earn the settlers' currency to feed their families and build new homes. Their whole livelihood is rooted in the occupation. Revolution would risk everything. This builds off your earlier point, that many are too ingrained in the system to rise up. It explores how this failure is tied to their sense of security, so you can begin to see the way around it. Alright. Those workers who do speak up, who highlight the clear injustice all around them, will be disowned by those who ostensibly protect them. For unions and local and advocacy groups, such agitators are simply cause too much trouble. So they will be forced to leave, before the occupying force catches wind and holds the union responsible. Guess they never get past the complaining on social media phase. Right, if the unions are the means to hold the ruling powers accountable, and the unions, the colonized, rely on the status quo and the colonizers for their safety and security, for essentially all the systems of their livelihood, the majority will force out the dissenters to maintain the status quo. It makes sense. This is a logical extension of the point you raised, Ariadne. Those invested in the colonial society will want to remove revolutionaries before they become a problem. The revolutionaries will protest on their way out, of course, and try to convince the others to fight. Revolution's imminent. What do you stall for? You stand for nothing. What do you fall for? Come again? That was Hamilton. I quoted Hamilton just now. Seemed relevant. Ah, the hip-hop musical about your colonial founding fathers. I have thoughts about that, too. But even if revolutionaries did make arguments in verse, it would not be enough to convince their fellows to act. quote, oh, Harry, oh boy. That's connected. Forces that chase would-be revolutionaries from the cities set them up for success in the long term, because they're driven into the countryside. Indeed, and the countryside is where it all begins. Whom the party ignores. Colonial life takes place mainly in the coastal cities. The inner country is ignored, left to local warlords and shamans. Little profit to be found there. Neither the colonial forces nor the unions of the colonized pay these starving souls notice. This breeds extensive distrust between those in the city and those in the country. Ignorance allows hate to fester. So while would-be revolutionaries fail in the city, their grievances are perfectly primed to ignite that hate into action. There are countless examples in history of the country exploding into violence. The Mau Mau uprising in Kenya comes to mind. The neglected in the country are susceptible to any story of horror for the city. They have few references to distinguish fact from fiction. True stories of abuse get spun into even greater tales. The settlers bathe in native blood, grind our bones to make their bread. Finally, something snaps. Country folk descend on colonial institutions, indiscriminately attacking police and doctors alike. Driven by hate and spontaneous raids, they go further than the revolutionary exiles ever would have. And though these exiles hardly respect the ignorant in the country, they will happily take advantage of the chaos. Establishes why, even with the factors we discussed, the uprising is inevitable. After all, only those touched by colonial life can be bound by it. Those who the colonizers ignore and suffer for it are the dry kindling that will go up when the spark reaches it. The unrest is invited to the city by those struggling to survive, those unable to maintain the security of a job and home. Once fighting reaches the city, the colonial world is revealed as no true safe haven for the working native. No reason to abstain from the fight, those once paralyzed by security will finally take up arms. How can we be so sure fighting will spread to the city? Country folk view cities as the roots of corruption. Inevitably, their rage turns to them. The colonial military will follow, and once safe streets are thrown into chaos. Against this backdrop, the revolutionary leaders return, their calls to resist now amplified by the reality of conflict. But people didn't want revolution before, why would they now? Most fear the pain of change. With fighting all around, the pain is already there. There's little left to lose and much more to gain. It shows how, once the struggle begins, its embers spread to the whole of the people. Even wet kindling will ignite under the right circumstances. No colonial force can sustain itself indefinitely when besieged from all sides. Efforts to do so only become more expensive with time. When the revolution has spread this widely, everyone fights as if their individual conflict represents the whole of the nation. If the colonists manage to suppress the embers at one location, the fires will only burn more brightly elsewhere. As a result, trying to maintain control stops being an appealing prospect for the colonizing country. As mentioned in the previous argument, attempts to do so amount to economic self-harm. With all the previous steps, leverage has finally been created to change the national situation. Alright, and... okay, wow. Fanon has mapped out quite the domino chain here. So many different social forces involved. Is there a point where these forces don't line up as neatly as he thinks? He also keeps taking notes, hasn't he? He keeps taking notes and I don't like it. Discomfort with psychological profiling reflects deep-set insecurities. He's right. Ah. Roaster. This is precisely what she needs right now. Alright. What do you mean by this? As the colonists retreat from the city and country, the revolutionary leaders will be ready to fill the void. Independence is finally achieved. This appears pretty self-evident, does it not? If the colonists withdraw, the future is in the hands of the native once more. What to stop them from charting a better course forward? This is the conclusion both of my argument and the chain of events. The colonists have retreated, the natives are finally free to build their own nation however they wish. Nothing will spread to the city. Think about this one here. Well, if I'm between different groups of natives, be set aside so the natives who live in cities and the... I don't know if can't really think of a good point to argue right here, right now. Okay, I think we've at the point where we can't really question any of this as it's laid out, because it makes sense. The folks from the ignored areas are brought into the cities by the exiled revolutionary leaders, which call the people in the cities to action because their safe spaces are not as safe as they thought, and the uprising continues, and the colonial power is forced to withdraw. As long as the revolutionary struggle continues. So I think the question we need to ask here is what happens afterwards. Okay, good. This chain of cause and effect you've mapped out is incredibly intricate. Attract many different social factors. It divides between groups to plot a path to successful decolonization. Holds up pretty well. Right until the end. Right up until the end. Biggest force keeping the people united? The revolutionary struggle itself. So, tell me, Fanon, what happens when that struggle comes to an end? Oh, excellent catch, Ariadne. I can't believe I missed that. It seems to be that there are two toxic hierarchies in your worldview. First is the relationship between the colonizer and the colonized. The second is the relationship between city and country. Neither relationship is healthy, and the colonial system definitely plays a part in making each worse. The tension between city and country won't just disappear when the colonial power retreats. When the common enemy is removed, all that distrust and suspicion will be front and center. There's a good deal of nuance there. Not everyone in each group will. I appreciate your commitment to not generalizing, Fanon, but, honestly, the fact we can say not all revolutionary doesn't change the fact that, by your own analysis, the divide here is enormous. There's no doubt those in the city emerge from the struggle in a far better position than the country folk. And the country folk emerge from their position still thinking that those folks in the city, they might have fought us, but they still lived in the comfort of the eating out of the oppressor's hands. To some degree. He has already established that there is some degree of mistrust. There's a fair degree of mistrust and misinformation coming from some country to city. What's to stop the revolutionaries in the city from focusing on themselves? Or even worse, re-establishing an exploitative relationship with the country? To leave this problem unsolved feels like a job half done. Means he no doubt has covered this in some degree. The points you raised are, once again, astute. In the aftermath of revolution, we frequently see revolutionaries act just as you say. They focus on enriching themselves while the country drifts back into ill-informed poverty, no better off than during the colonial regime. These heads of government sell their country to the most terrifying of all enemies, ignorance. Of course, the old colonial power takes no small joy in this. Look how things have gone to hell since we left. We were right about those savages all along. How depressing. Even after all that bloodshed, nothing really changes. Oh, I strongly disagree. This half-done job is still better than one unstarted. Do you all believe dismantling colonialism would be clean and easy? No, no, of course not. Having no guarantee that life will actually improve for those who fought. Marx or not, that's really, really rough. Guess we'll have to keep...
Nonsense!
Moment, please. Our appointment is not yet over. This is not the first time I've reviewed this problem. A significant part of my work was dedicated to it. There's a way to build a better end state for all involved. Is it more violence? No, not if done correctly. Though if not, who knows? The aftermath of revolution, the middle class and revolutionary party can easily slip into the oppressive void left by the colonists. They will rely on nationalism and prejudice to prop themselves up, instead of doing the hard work of supporting the people. To prevent the new government from betraying the people, we must reject centralized notions of leadership in favor of education. Thus, the development of government is bound with the development of the people as a whole. So you see, the Revolutionary Party must focus on raising up the people around them. We must rid ourselves of the contemptuous assumption that the masses are incapable of governing themselves. We ought to uplift the people, develop their brains, fill them with ideas. Only then can we rebuild in a way that actually benefits all, overcoming our last great obstacle and preventing the need for a second revolution down the line. Yes, everything can be explained to the people, on the single condition that you really want them to understand. This is surprisingly a lot like the dream of Capra. Finding ways to bring philosophical education to all, give everyone opportunities they didn't have before. I never doubted many of our ideals are aligned, Senator. I'm deeply skeptical your government will ever have the will to realize such a selfless aim. Not for lack of dreams and ideals, but it's your government. That's the problem. Look, I've had problems with Mom's plans too. I think the part where they trapped her in a philosophical afterlife, but let's lay off her a bit. Very well. I'll return to my own theses. Ask your questions, Ariadne Jones. I like Fanon. Alright, you know that revolutionaries are well positioned to take over the colonial system. Left unchecked, they can pocket an enormous portion of the nation's wealth and never return to the people as a whole. Alright, new evidence? The colonial power leaves behind an enormous amount of infrastructure and technology ripe for the taking. But seizing this wealth is not so much leaping ahead as it is beginning at the end. The nation reaches the late stage of economic development without knowing the determination and innovation of youth. Leaders imitate the most indulgent aspects of the colonial elite, building elaborate mansions and monuments and getting themselves from the people. Tourism becomes the industry of choice, an easy, lazy way to extract money from European powers. Come to beautiful colony land. No longer technically a colony, but give us money and we'll pretend. Ooh. How's this connected to the rest of your argument? Having a more complete picture of the problem helps us determine what we wish to avoid. What do you mean by this? Nationalist rulers of undeveloped countries will not do any real work on behalf of the people. Instead, such leaders attempt to keep the people complacent, venting the flames of suspicion against a series of scapegoats. Do not stop with those who were once settlers. Different tribes, different ideologies, all will be targeted. As time passes, the boogeyman changes. There's always someone to hate, and the government will use that hate to keep control. Oof. Oof, indeed. God, this is so much of this is directly tailored to dismantling colonialist societies, but if you follow anything we've done as a country the past how many years, and this is should be ringing bells to you that I'm going to say I'm about to make a really obvious point, then circle back to Fanon here, because It should be ringing alarm bells to you. This is how America is acting within itself and beyond itself. And then we circle back to the point of America is a deeply colonialist nation. And they haven't grown out of it. We are God, we were the colony who successfully rebelled, and then ultimately we have collapsed back into the failed education, rife with tribalism. God. The fucking boiling pot instead of the salad. God, there is plenty of great. God. I should. It's okay. Saying that is not entirely fair because there is so much great displays of various cultures in this country, but the problem is there's too many people who want to boil it. Who see it and want to fucking boil it away. It's beautiful displays of culture and diversity, but people see it and they're afraid of what they don't understand. They want to boil it all the way. That's the sad part. That's the fucking sad part. But everything that Fanon is talking about here, we are guilty of as a nation, as a government, and as those who directly fall in support of this government. Power and prejudice are a dangerous combination. In colonial times, prejudice existed on both sides, but power was entirely in the hands of the settlers. Post-independence, however, the point is different. They hate the natives given preference. Citizens will demand foreigners be purged from public life, and since doing so doubles as consolidating power for the government, it will oblige. This shows the harmful methods an undeveloped government will use to maintain power. It's connected because we must understand this misbehavior if we are to adequately prevent it. In favor of... How decentralized are we talking? How does that mesh with education? Going full anarchy? Fanon's cool no rule school? Not at all. The free-form nature of anarchism would struggle to elevate and inform the uneducated as needed. This does mean, however, we must avoid having all the power concentrated in one place. Leadership, education, defense all should be brought to the people nationwide, not hoarded by bureaucrats in cities. The painful thing is that the government should work. Government should work if all parts are doing their jobs, but our Congress has fucking failed us morbidly. On all parties. On all parties. God, I will always come back to the fucking example of Democrat-controlled Congress, knowing that Roe v. Wade was in threat by a Supreme Court that obviously fucking Orange Man got to stuff with fucking sympathetic judges, so came under fire. Knowing that it was going to come under fire, our Congress refused to do anything to codify Roe v. Wade, let the court overturn it. And then immediately the day after, we get fucking fundraising emails from fucking Nancy Pelosi saying, send us money to fight back. Why don't you do your fucking jobs and protect our rights instead of fucking turning around the next day when you do nothing and let our rights be fucking sapped away and turn it into fucking fundraising bullshit. We should be tired of living like this. But we can't... It all feels so fucking impossible to deal with. And I hope this video is coming from a slightly more hopeful place, but if it's not, we should be tired of living like this. And we should keep fucking fighting. Fighting it on all fronts. Because... it's all so bloody suffocating in the... Yes. All should be brought to the people nationwide, not hoarded by bureaucrats in cities, not hoarded by fucking private schools, where you have to pay to get in, while our schools nationwide go underfunded and people are more concerned with arming teachers instead of actually funding teachers. They don't want to fucking fund school lunches. They don't think kids going to school 8 hours a day have the right to food. If that's not the sign that our government is failing our people, then I don't know what the fuck is. Still, I'd like to hear more about how, if we can. Fair enough, I'll expand on these ideas. Alright, clarifying statements. Get a skepticism, talk of unity, so key during the struggle becomes a cool subjugation. Interesting, keep a careful eye on those who led the people in the past. For once their powers of persuasion were used for good, now they were likely to be used for ill. Desire for a hero is always questionable. It encourages people to look to the top instead of their fellows to improve the situation. During the revolution, such figureheads had a use, awakening the people and sending them on a forward march, heroic and unmitigated. But after the revolution, a leader's talk of unity is no longer a call to action, it is a call to complacency. Put the people to sleep, and 3 or 4 times a year ask them to remember the colonial period and bask in how far they've come. Once you were stepped on by foreign colonists. Now you are stepped on by people who look like you. Yes, we must prevent the party from ever becoming a willing tool in the hands of a leader. Connected. This point illustrates that the most central point of centralized government is also the center of potential corruption. Makes sense? It's clearly an essential observation. Get it? Like, essential, but as you said central a lot, so... Your compulsive putting almost qualifies as disorder. Educating and elevating the people of the region in which they are embedded. The leading members of the party ought to avoid the capital as if it had the plague. And locating themselves among the country instead, they will have to serve the needs of each region. Primarily among those needs is education. So it'd be spread like districts, like states, like districts. System that should work when the people who get those positions actually listen and try to work. And remember that they fucking work for the needs of the people in their district, not for the needs of the party, quote unquote, as a whole. Obviously, the Republican Party has gone to an awful place in this country. That is going to take a fucking miracle to rescue. But I have had serious problems with the way the core, quote-unquote, Democratic Party as a whole conducts itself for years now. But, alright. When you live in a place for long enough, you become connected to it. So the leaders will become connected to the people of regions others otherwise ignored. We'll see what is lacking, for it is lacking for them too, and leverage the national apparatus to fix the issues. Sometimes foreign technology and assistance may be required, but in the process the natives should always be educated on these tools. Thus the people learn to build their own bridges and man their own machines. Soon they're innovating beyond the template of before. core solution to everything we've discussed, and the way to fix the divide between the party and the city and the people of the country is to eliminate the divide. I like this. This is the ideal. Okay, standing army is under the control of the political powers, and thus can be used for oppression. Should have no permanent soldiers. The number of permanent officers should be kept to a minimum. Instead, the people should be prepared as a militia, ready to fight if the need arises, but dedicated to other tasks. If the army becomes a self-sustaining body, sooner or later it will find itself without any definite mission. Idle generals will draw up their own manifestos and come to threaten the government. The way to avoid this is to refocus those individuals on other tasks. An engineer is 1,000 times more indispensable to his country than an officer. After all, unless an external power attempts to assert control, what threat would demand a standing army? Kill the tomatoes. What if tomatoes start coming alive and killing people? Add me why? Ultimately, as ridiculous as that example is, such a threat would illustrate the effectiveness of the militia I mentioned earlier. People may disagree on many things. They would be united by the desire to not be murdered by tomatoes. The achievement says bring up bottom kill tomatoes again because why not? Obviously, why not? Alright, a centralized government can hurt the newly independent nation. Problem. I have to keep reminding myself that generally, majority of people who aggressively arm themselves are trained and responsible. Majority of them and the system. I am not qualified to really speak on whether the system works in vetting those who aren't qualified to own guns, keeping them out of their hands, because sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes they just get guns from family members who were qualified until they left access to said guns in the hands of someone, in reach of someone who wasn't qualified to carry a gun. It's messy, and I'm naturally, uncomfortable around guns, so I'm naturally inclined to be uncomfortable by that notion, but in this standing, in place of a standing army, which should be controlled by a central force and could turn against the people easily, yes, that outcome's preferable. I know Fanon is talking about newly liberated countries, but some of this stuff sounds familiar. What do you mean? I mean, government focusing on enriching themselves, using prejudice and group resentment to keep people complacent? Does that all ring a little true for you? It does. She's just not gonna admit it, though. Too real? Okay, let's get back to the theoretically ex-colonized country land. Yeah, she knows it. She knows it's hitting. She knows what's wrong. That probably makes her better than the real Hillary. Government is not for the people, it is of the people. The growth of government must grow of the people as well. We must try relentlessly and passionately to teach the masses that everything depends on them. If we stagnate, it is their responsibility, and if we go forward, it is due to them too. Support? As long as the people remain uneducated, there is no hope for the nation to elevate itself. Everything we've discussed illustrates this. With the whole of the national apparatus focused on education, we can build a successful nation. God, If this would be the fucking dream. This would be the fucking dream. I disconnected. This is my conclusion. I believe it is sufficiently conclusive. I picked up tribalism in the ideal slate. Damn, this is really solid. I can't find any fault with this. I need to stop and think on this for a moment. Okay, I think this is going to be kind of a difficult topic to tackle, but I think I see what we're getting at here. The ideal would be, yeah, we live in a place for long enough to become connected to it, at least become connected to the peoples of regions otherwise ignored. See what is lacking in said regions, leverage the national apparatus to fix issues. But the counterpoint here is that if tensions are not actively countered, abilities can turn towards ethnic and cultural subgroups, and if the leaders are all living yeah, it's a difficult topic for me, awkward white guy accountant, to talk about, but you can see the point here. The counterpoint, like the theoretical counterpoint to leaders being based locally, like entirely locally, is that tribalism might develop between the leaders and their people.
Nonsense!
Okay, first things first. Mistrust between city and country is the last great obstacle for nation building. You have a nice plan to tackle that mistrust. Focusing the entire national apparatus on empowering the neglected, that'll do a lot of good. Oh, how interesting. Is this it then? Has Fanon found the ideal approach for government? Well, he's tackled what was presented as the last great obstacle. But beyond that obstacle lurks several hundred more. Oh no, what's he writing now? Bastard exclamations are endearing, but often thinly justified. But to get to the point, Ariadne. As Fanon laid out the problems with post-colonial governments, one thing became clear. City and country is not, in fact, the only toxic dynamic that remains. Society contains countless ethnic, political, and religious divisions, each bound with their own explosive packages of resentment. So we have more steps to take. I'm aware of this. I highlighted these problems myself. As we raise the people up, we'll find ways to address them. Well, there's the rub. Methods you propose to raise people up, to avoid clashes between city and country, and make countering other conflicts far more difficult. Having remote pockets of government focused on local issues is wonderful for activism. A militia instead of an army definitely puts power in the hands of citizens. What happens if the militia clashes with itself based on those divides? Things get more complicated when local population A hates local population B. We train them all to fight and remove all countermeasures. What do they do if they turn on each other? We raise them up, teach them all to be better. But you said yourself, no cause gets 100% support. Some will inevitably act on old hatred. You also stated that when fighting breaks out, the safety net collapses. Reasons for restraint disappear. You wind up with a free-for-all with no one capable of reining it in. And you're covering the floor with gasoline and hoping no one lights a match. So the ultimately, the locally based governments support the needs of the people directly are great, but there's some overarching support needed. So we're not completely there yet. Oh no. Oh no. We've hit a dilemma here. Snap. Oh no. Remarkable fortitude under duress. Someone of her background, Ariadne Jones, is capable. Sometimes, when I'm feeling truly self-destructive, I review the more recent history of Algeria, the country I fought so hard to liberate. I wasn't alive when independence was achieved. If I had been, maybe I could have made a difference. The country's history is dominated by coups and civil wars, everything I hoped to avoid, all rooted in the fundamental failure of the government to unite its people. Factionalism may have fruited under colonialism, but it is also a sociological fact that no theory of unity can abolish. And yet, I still believe, somewhere out there, a bright new future none of us have imagined awaits. Something different from the European models of the past, paying regard to the prodigious theses she has put forward, but also aware of her crimes. We can turn over a new leaf, we can work out new concepts, and set forth a new man. Yes, I still believe, despite all evidence. Forgive me my small cognitive dissonance. Hey. Hope is good. Of course, Fanon. Pythia Smith, I have one last thought for you as well. I can, on some level, appreciate your belief in the system. Surely democracy should be able to empower the people and change what needs to be changed. But whatever the merits of their ideas, the actions of European men have failed to bring the problem of mankind to an infinitely higher plane. Do not be another who falls short. Fight past all the barriers, whatever it takes. Perhaps you just can. Thank you, Fanon. That was remarkably... That was a great great discussion. Hey, at least you kind of got his endorsement at the end there, right? As much as he'd ever endorse someone so embedded in the colonial system. That's what you wanted. You have to feel good about that, huh? Hey, if she's not directly gushing over that, then maybe she's finally taking some kind of positive lesson away from this. I don't know anymore. What? Adney, look, I'm tired. Tired of disappointing you. Oh! It's time for me to admit what's been obvious from the start. Our system isn't perfect. And I guess I'm walking evidence of that, huh? My position, constantly vying for supporters any way you can, admitting you've changed your mind can be a death sentence. People who agreed with you before feel betrayed. People who agree with you now mock you for being slow or doubt your sincerity. The longer I participate, the more I dig in. I stop learning and just fight. I fought Confucius. I fought you. I fought everyone we've encountered. Didn't even question what I believed. Deep down, it was just what I had to do. No perfect system would encourage such a toxic cycle. I don't believe it. Why now? I tried to tell you this. Dad tried to tell you this. We all tried to tell you this. I don't know. I was so focused on the good I thought I could do, I guess I didn't care. But I'm going to lose by election, Adney. I'm going to lose. So what does it matter? Well, I don't know if that's true or not. Not really. But no matter what, at least we can get you out of here now, right? That's the most important thing to me. It's true. Pythia Smith's viewpoint has fundamentally shifted, it seems. Tell the kid what you've learned. Let the way home open. Very well. Kate, here is the answer, the one I should have given long ago. People have views that don't make sense, that are often driven by spite. I'd rather vote for someone who gives them easy answers, someone like Tucker, pursue hard truths. Knowing we're all so lost, how can anyone ever hope to govern well? In the end, my daughter was right. There's no societal structure that won't have fatal issues. Nothing happened. Maybe it didn't hear you? No, it heard her. I don't understand. It felt right, hadn't it? It felt honest. More honest than I've been in years. Isn't that all it was supposed to take, Arbiter? Answer that was true? Prove I can grow? What's more true than humanity's ability to utterly screw itself? Hmm. Unless there's a more hopeful outcome we can get here, I'm afraid the way remains closed to you. What can we do now, though? So that's it, then. Mom. I'm sorry, I don't think there's anything more I can do. That gate is never going to open. I'm stuck here. Nonsense. The old college try. Ooh. We'll see where this goes next time.